What if the most powerful empire in the galaxy made one fatal mistake, not by underestimating Earth's weapons, but by misunderstanding its heart? They came for conquest, but when they touched what humans hold most dear, they didn't just start a war, they triggered their own extinction. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe to this channel and show a thumbs up by liking the video. It fuels more epic stories just like this. Now buckle up. Let's jump into the story. The grand chamber of the Zolvarian Empire stretched wide and high, lit by dim red light and humming walls of shimmering data. Ancient battle trophies stood proudly on pedestals, helmets from extinct species, banners soaked in the dust of fallen worlds. This was where war was shaped and victory was always assumed. At the far end of the hall, on a throne made of crystallized obsidian, sat Emperor Jarek, his blue-scaled fingers resting lazily on the armrests, his compound eyes locked on the figure standing before him. That figure was Keller, once a great general, now a relic. His armor was dull, scratched, and mismatched with mechanical replacements. His left leg clicked when he walked. His right arm had been replaced with a cybernetic graft that whirred softly with every twitch. He didn't care for ceremony, but today, he had something to say that demanded attention, even if none of them truly wanted to hear it. "You're making a mistake," Keller said plainly. His voice was rough and low, like stone dragging across metal. "Earth is not what you think it is." Around him, the Council of Ministers smirked. One of them, Minister Orden, leaned back in his chair with theatrical boredom. "Earth is a Class C planet. Fragmented, poorly defended, emotionally unstable. They've been fighting themselves for centuries. It's barely a challenge." Keller's metal hand clenched and released. He had heard it all before. "Yes, they are fractured. But they are also something you haven't dealt with before. You think war is won with weapons. They fight with something else." Emperor Jarek tilted his head slightly, amused. "Are you saying they are more dangerous than the Valkorians? We reduced them to dust in under 2 weeks." "I fought humans once," Keller said, taking a step forward. "Long before they left their solar system. It was supposed to be a minor operation containment, nothing more. But we lost half our unit. They were undertrained, outgunned, outnumbered, and they fought like it was their last breath. Because to them, it was." Another minister let out a chuckle. "So they're stubborn. That's hardly a threat." "It's not just stubbornness," Keller replied. "It's something deeper. When they lose everything, they don't collapse. They become something else. You won't scare them into surrender. You won't break them with strength. You'll only show them what they must survive." The room remained silent for a moment. Then Emperor Jarek spoke, his voice smooth but cold. "So what would you have us do, old general? Leave them alone? Watch from the stars as they flail at one another?" "No," Keller said. "I know how this works. You'll attack them no matter what I say. Just know this, if you cross a certain line, if you touch the wrong part of their world, they will stop fighting each other and they'll come for you. Every last one of them." Jarek raised an eyebrow. "And what line would that be?" Keller looked up at the hovering hologram of Earth. "If you harm their women, their daughters, mothers, sisters, you won't just start a war, you'll start your own end." For a moment, the air in the room changed. The laughter stopped. A few of the ministers shifted in their seats. Even Jarek's fingers paused their idle drumming. "That," Minister Orden said with a sneer, "is the most emotional nonsense I've ever heard in this chamber." "It's not emotion," Keller replied. "It's warning, one based on blood and experience. You can conquer their land, you can break their cities. But if you touch what they love, what they protect instinctively, you will not see peace again." Emperor Jarek leaned back into his throne, his expression unreadable. "Thank you for your insight, General. You may return to your quarters." Keller didn't argue. He had said what needed to be said. Whether they would listen was not up to him. As he turned to walk away, He glanced once more at the glowing image of Earth, slowly spinning above the war table. A small blue planet. Quiet, fragile-looking. They had no idea what was waiting. 2 cycles later, the invasion began. Zulvarian dreadships covered the skies like steel clouds. Earth cities were overwhelmed in hours. Their defenses crumbled. Their governments silenced. Streets were lined with armored troops as the Empire claimed another victory. The broadcast flowed in. Captured leaders, civilian surrenders. Tactical maps painted with red marks showing Zulvarian control. The council watched with pride. Jarek toasted with his ministers. It was going exactly as predicted. Then, the executions began. A quiet order from Jarek's standard procedure. Display dominance. Break will. Random prisoners, chosen for the cameras. Among them, human women. The broadcast was sent across Earth's networks, and then the silence came. No protests, no scattered fighters, no demands. No movement at all. At first, they celebrated. "They are broken," Minister Orden declared. "The resistance has died." But Keller knew better. He sat alone in his chamber, watching the feed, a cold weight in his gut. "They're not broken," he whispered to no one. "They're preparing." The skies above Earth were quiet now, but not in the way that brought peace. After the initial invasion, Zulvarian forces had rolled across continents like a tidal wave. Their technology overwhelmed human defenses. Their strategy had worked before on 100 other planets, and Earth seemed no different at first. Cities were subdued, power grids taken. Governments fell one after another. Soldiers in silver armor patrolled streets where resistance once sparked. There were no more riots. No more cries for freedom. Just silence. Commander Nera stood on the roof of what used to be a government building in Central Europe, now repurposed as an observation post. The wind brushed against her armor as she looked out across the ruined skyline. Everything looked still, almost too still. In her early days of command, she had grown used to human unpredictability. She expected protests, ambush, desperation. But this was something else entirely. It had been 3 days since the first public executions were broadcast. The people had gone quiet almost instantly. No reports of resistance. No local outbursts. Even the underground communications had gone dark. "This is too easy," muttered Turk, a young Zulvarian scout standing beside her. He was new to Earth and still carried the fresh confidence of the Empire's might. "They've stopped trying." "They haven't stopped," Nera said, narrowing her eyes. "They're waiting." Elsewhere across the globe, similar reports came in. Patrol units were completing their rounds with no incidents. Surveillance drones showed civilians hiding indoors or vanishing altogether. Roads once packed with chaos were now empty. At first, High Command dismissed it. They called it submission. Proof that Earth had finally bent the knee. Then the first patrol went missing. In the ruins of what had once been New York City, a unit of 10 Zulvarian soldiers failed to report back. They had gone into the lower city to investigate a flicker on a motion scanner. No distress signal, no transmission, no trace. A backup team was sent in. They too disappeared. The search continued for hours until all teams were ordered to retreat. The area was now marked unstable. The same pattern began to repeat itself across the globe. Remote outposts fell silent. Convoys vanished. Soldiers began whispering stories to each other, half-truths, eerie tales of shadows that moved. Strange sounds that echoed from places that should be abandoned. A mining outpost in the mountains was found completely deserted, the Zulvarian workers missing. The only sign left behind was a single human phrase carved into a metal door. "You started this." Back at Central Command, Emperor Jarek was still unfazed. He waved away concerns as fear-mongering. Their fear makes them desperate. They lash out like animals cornered. But some began to worry. Systems were glitching. Equipment malfunctioned. Communications were randomly jammed with strange frequencies. A single transmission appeared across multiple screens one evening, a human face, blurry and bruised, looking into the camera with burning eyes. The message was short: "You should have listened." Commander Nero watched the clip over and over. There was no traceable source. The signal had come through hacked satellites and ground-based transmitters stitched together by human hands. Tactical teams were dispatched to find the broadcast's origin, but none returned. Then came the booby traps. A team investigating a seemingly abandoned village triggered an explosion. The source was a fuel tank rigged with basic wiring and pieces of Zolvarian armor. Another patrol unit in the southern zone discovered one of their own armored carriers set ablaze, and inside, a strange mechanism activated by movement, a simple pressure plate that released gas and ignited within seconds. Technician units, trying to understand how these crude devices worked, began finding modified Zolvarian tech mixed in. Earth's people were not just resisting, they were learning. Every fallen soldier left behind tools for their enemies to reverse engineer. And the humans were quick. Reports began to arrive of drones being hacked in mid-air, portable shields disrupted by unfamiliar code, entire supply routes rerouted or destroyed by what High Command called interference. But Nira knew better. "They're not hiding," she said aloud during a meeting. "They're preparing to strike." Some of her colleagues laughed, but not all of them. Commander Drail, who had lost 2 entire squads in the past week, looked grim. "It's like they vanished into the ground. We don't see them. We don't hear them. But they're watching." In the Northern Territory, a large base was overtaken not by a frontal assault, but by a quiet infiltration. The guards were found unconscious, not killed, but sedated. The power grid had been shut down, communication severed. Inside the main control room, someone had left a message written across the console in human blood. "This is for them." Turk, the scout, began sleeping with his weapon in hand. He spoke less and watched the shadows more. He told Nira he heard whispers through his coms at night, voices he didn't recognize speaking in a language that made his bones feel cold. Then, a massive dreadship in orbit lost control of its navigation. The command cruiser received a transmission. Seconds before impact, a human face again. Different, but the same fire behind the eyes. The voice was calm. "You crossed a line. Now you'll learn." The ship spiraled and crashed into the ocean. Commander Nira stood silently in her observation. Post once more. The sky was filled with clouds, and the wind was colder now. Earth hadn't been conquered. It had just been awakened. And fury was coming. The war no longer made sense, at least not to the Zolvarians. For centuries, their empire had operated like a flawless machine. Every invasion followed a pattern. Locate the weakness, strike with speed, dismantle resistance, and rebuild the world in the Empire's image. But Earth refused to follow the script. It wasn't just a rebellion anymore. It was chaos, and the Zolvarian commanders couldn't understand how everything had unraveled so quickly. Captain Thura stood in the command bay of the dreadship Solus Mark, watching as her screen flickered for the 3rd time that hour. Her crew had reported another data breach, low-level, clumsy, clearly human, but somehow effective. The Empire's AI systems were advanced, near impervious to intrusion, yet Earth's hackers were tearing holes through them with tools that should have been obsolete a century ago. One security tech even showed her the source of the latest breach. A virus, embedded in what the humans called a zip file, had slipped through the firewall by disguising itself as a music folder titled Grandma's Cookies. She didn't even know what cookies were. Meanwhile, rebel activity had increased in unpredictable bursts. One moment, a city was silent. The next, it erupted in a series of explosions and booby-trapped ambushes. Human fighters would vanish after each attack, leaving only scorched roads and scrambled signals. The Zolvarian Empire's elite tracking drones, which had once located prey through steel and stone, were now being misled by holograms of human children or recordings of barking dogs. None of it made sense. Down on Earth, human rebels like Vero worked from the shadows. Vero had once been a teenager with a passion for video games and old movies. Now he was the leader of a small unit of resistance fighters operating out of an abandoned subway tunnel. With just a few salvaged Zolvarian power cores, 3 laptops, and a whiteboard covered in drawings of war plans that looked like school doodles, Vero had managed to shut down a patrol grid covering half a continent. His strategy was simple: confuse, distract, dismantle. Engineer Lennox, a former satellite technician from Australia, had turned her basement into a miniature lab. Using spare parts, broken Zolvarian drones, and a toaster, she built a device that emitted a pulse strong enough to black out an entire field unit's visors. The pulse was so basic that Zolvarian systems didn't register it as a threat until soldiers began stumbling around blind in combat zones. The Empire's greatest minds struggled to understand why their superior machines kept failing. Their warships were being hijacked with techniques their manuals didn't even account for. A cruiser named Fireburn Dusk was lost entirely after its core. AI was corrupted by a human flash drive that installed an old Earth program called Clippy, which then proceeded to give the Zolvarian captain writing advice before locking him out of his own systems. Captain Thura began seeing patterns, though she couldn't explain them. It was never the same tactic twice. Human attacks came from above, below, through communication lines, or even inside dreams, if the soldier reports were to be believed. Traps were disguised as broken vending machines. Snipers hid behind digital projections of rubble. Once, an entire battalion was lured into a warehouse by a looped broadcast of a crying baby. The warehouse exploded moments after they entered. One mission, Zolvarian soldiers opened a crate marked as emergency supplies only to find dozens of plush toys that exploded into smoke bombs, followed by human fighters charging with scavenged weapons and the sound of ancient rock music playing from hidden speakers. And still, they fought with smiles. It wasn't just resistance, it was joy in chaos. Humanity had taken their fear and twisted it into something new. They didn't try to match Zolvarian strength. They didn't aim for a fair fight, they aimed for confusion. Every victory was a message. You may be stronger, but we are stranger. A broadcast sent to all Empire frequencies confirmed it. A human, face dirty and cut, leaned close to the camera. "We don't need to win the war," he said, grinning. "We just need to make you regret starting it." Emperor Jarek, hidden deep in his fortress on Zolvarian Prime, watched the feeds in disbelief. Fleet after fleet reported sabotage. Commanders stopped filing battle plans, opting instead for desperate requests for backup. Cities once considered safe zones now echoed with the sound of metal on metal as captured walkers turned against their creators. Zolvarian soldiers began refusing solo patrol duty. They feared empty streets and laughter in the distance. Some claimed they heard music in their helmets before blacking out. Others were found muttering human phrases they didn't understand. Back on Earth, Vero led his unit through an underground pipe system beneath what was once a Zolvarian base. They moved silently, placing small beacons programmed to activate in a strange sequence. When asked what the devices did, he shrugged. "Not sure yet," he said with a grin. "But it'll be fun." The Empire had expected resistance. They had prepared for pain. What they were not ready for was madness. The kind of madness born not from fear, but from love for home, for people, for freedom. Humans weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for the joy of being the thorn in the side of a perfect machine, and that made them impossible to predict. Zolvarian Prime was no longer the jewel of the Empire. Once filled with towering blackstone spires and glowing command towers, the planet now lay under thick clouds of smoke and fire. The skies that had once shimmered with orbital pathways now churned with ash. Craters scarred the capital. The great war chamber, where strategies were once whispered with pride and confidence, stood in ruins. Walls cracked. Lights flickered. The heart of a galaxy-spanning power was falling apart, and nothing could stop it. Inside the shattered throne hall, Emperor Jarek sat slouched on his twisted throne. His armor was scorched, one eye swollen shut. Around him, only silence remained. His advisors had either fled or fallen. The screens that once displayed victories across the stars now looped error messages in human code. He gripped the armrest tightly, claws digging into the stone, but there was no command to give, no soldier left to listen. Everything he had ruled, everything he had believed unshackable, had been torn away. The sound of footsteps echoed through the hall, measured, heavy, unhurried. General Keller entered the room, moving slowly but steadily. He was older now, more worn than before, but his eyes held the same weight they always had. He had seen many wars. He had survived many losses, but never had he watched an empire unravel. Like this. He stopped several feet from the throne and looked at Jarek without anger, just quiet recognition. "You're still here," Keller said, his voice low. "I should not be," Jarek answered, voice dry and cracked. "But the galaxy refuses to give me the ending I deserve." Keller stepped forward. "No, not the one you deserve. The one you earned," Jarek scoffed, a hollow sound. "We were gods. We brought order to chaos." "You brought conquest to the unwilling," Keller corrected. "You saw resistance as disrespect. But Earth was never yours to take." Jarek looked away. "We had weapons, firepower, fleets built over centuries, and they used. Toasters, laughter, toy robots filled with explosives. Who does that? People. With nothing to lose," Keller replied. "People who understand that fear is a tool, not a cage." A new sound entered the chamber, metal boots against stone, a rhythm of purpose. A human captain approached, helmet tucked under his arm. His name was Lion. He was tall, but not imposing. Calm, not cruel. His uniform was worn, patched in places, but the Earth emblem remained clear over his chest. He stopped beside Keller and looked at Jarek with the same stillness one might offer a fading storm. "We didn't come to destroy," Lion said. "That was your way. We came because we had to. We came because you touched what we protect." Jarek stared at him. "So what now? Do you kill me? Burn the rest?" Lion shook his head. "We're not here for revenge. We're here for memory." He stepped forward and pulled a small device from his belt. He placed it gently at the base of the throne. It activated with a soft chime, and a projection lit up the dark chamber. Faces appeared, names, voices, the women who had been taken, the families left behind, the resistance fighters who never saw the end of the war. Their stories played, one after another. No weapons, no threats. Just remembrance. Jarek watched in. Silence. His breath shook. His hands trembled. For the first time, not from rage. "You thought killing would end them," Keller said quietly. "But all you did was give them a reason to fight beyond fear." Lion looked around the chamber. "This empire will be studied. Not for its glory, but as a warning. That arrogance burns, but memory lasts longer." Outside, Earth ships hovered silently in the red sky. They didn't fire. They didn't broadcast commands. They waited. The war was over. Not with an explosion, but with a choice. Earth had proven it could destroy, but it had also chosen not to. That was the final strike. Keller turned to leave, his metal leg clicking against the stone floor. Let the ruins speak for themselves. Lion followed, pausing, once to glance back at the shattered throne and the man who had once ruled a galaxy. Jarek did not move. The voices of the dead still echoed through the chamber, quiet and steady. Outside the palace, the wind carried the smell of ash and steel. The once mighty flags of Zolvarian pride lay torn in the dust. Children would someday walk these broken streets and ask what happened here. And someone would tell them, this was where power met its lesson. This was where fire taught. And Earth, once seen as weak, had become the spark that showed the stars what not to forget. Because in the end, strength wasn't about who had the biggest ship or the fastest beam. It was about who remembered what they stood for when everything was lost. And in that way, Earth had won more than a war. It had rewritten the meaning of resistance.